to give it over to Jamie.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. Okay, so like Amy said, my name is Jamie. I'm the early literacy specialist here. We're going to be talking about choosing books for your young child. Now, I'm stopping at about first and second grade-ish level, but know that some of the things that I'm saying now could easily be applicable for some of your older children too. There's really no wrong way to choose a book, but I'm just going to help you kind of navigate it. I swear to you, I'm not making this up. I had a patron come in yesterday who was looking for books for her first and second grader. And she was like, I don't even know where to go. I've been Googling and nothing's coming up. And I tried to Google search myself, and they give you book lists, but they don't tell you what exactly to look for. So hopefully this will kind of help a little bit, but it showed me at least two different things. One, this presentation is totally needed. Like if you needed to come back to it, but basically it's just that parents want to know what to do with their kids, what's the best thing to read. And second, it shows me that you as the viewer, you as the patron, as the parent, you're not alone. Like there are so many other people who don't know where to go from here. So you're in the right place. Hopefully this should clear up some questions. So just a brief little outline of what we're going to be going over. First, just the importance of choosing the right books, the 5 early literacy skills, the things to keep in mind, age level recommendations, and resources. Okay, so why is this important? So choosing the right books, it helps because it helps foster a love of reading for your little one. If you have this wonderful time that you spend together reading a book, they're going to just love reading. It's going to turn it into some kind of positive experience, and they're going to want to do it on their own too. And you're setting a really fantastic foundation for their early education. I would say too that it even indicates a higher probability of early school success. And that's according to the University of California's Cooperative Extension Program. So they did a lot of different studies about what early literacy means and how you can foster it at home and what are the impacts of that. And they found that children that were read to a lot, that had a lot of great early literacy activities growing up, were more likely to have early school success, which is exactly what we want to see. Of course, it helps develop their writing, vocab, comprehension, study skills. I could go on, imagination, literally everything. It is so important and so vital, and I'm sure you all know that too. And of course, one of my favorite things as a librarian, I'm sure Amy would probably feel the same too, but there's nothing I love more than a little one coming in after checking a book out and saying, oh my gosh, Miss Jamie, I read this by myself. This is the first time I read a book by myself. And that just, it's amazing. I mean, not only is it good for us to hear, but it shows me that they're kind of forming the sense of independence. They're forming this sense of accomplishment around reading, and they're excited and they want to learn and they want to keep doing it. So reading is super important just for self-confidence, honestly. And of course, I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, but it's a wonderful bonding experience. It is a wonderful bonding experience, especially if you maybe save your book reading for the end of the night, or maybe like before a snack or something like that to kind of calm them down. It's just you and your little one reading together, picking books. But it's a really good way to kind of keep them engaged and keep them happy. And I'm going to go very briefly over the 5 early literacy skills. You might be thinking like, why do I need to know these things? But actually it's pretty important. And a lot of these things kind of tie in with the books that I'm going to be reading or talking about today. So you can start doing kind of practicing these things while at home. We're just going to spend a little bit of time. So singing, it helps children remember things, or even remember longer words for a longer period of time. You can pick up new vocabulary from songs as well. So think of The wheels on the bus, for example. You have the wipers. Kids probably don't really know what wipers are, but once they hear it in the song and they know that it goes swish, 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 they can kind of put two and two together that those are on cars and they help with the rain. So it helps them build the vocabulary of wipers. And then I also thought too about I'm a little teapot. So some of us don't really have teapots just kind of hanging around the house that we can talk about, but just thinking about the song or the rhyme, like you think about their handle right here and their spout up here. So those are two brand new words that they just learned just from a rhyme or a song. Another thing too, I'm sure you all know this too, but talking is crazy important. It is so important. Not only talking about the things that you see during the day, like maybe in the walk, on your ride home from work or from picking them up from daycare or school, you could talk about the things that you're seeing around in the car. Let's see, another way that you can kind of practice talking a little bit, and really for, I don't know, I would say for any age, is just doing a picture walk. So for those of you who have kind of been through my Every Child Ready to Read series before, we've talked a lot about picture walks and what they are. Basically, instead, like here's your book. Instead of reading the words on the book, which is fine, like you can totally do that later, talk about what's going on in the book. So you can say, maybe start by asking yes/no questions to kind of start getting them engaged and wanting to talk a little more, but kind of focus on open-ended questions. How do you think this character feels? Why do you think this character feels this way? What do you think is going to happen next? Why is this animal your favorite in the book? So you can kind of like ask these questions to really get them engaged and get them practicing talking. It's really good too, because it shows when you ask a question, they have to be quiet. And once you're done with your inflection at the end of your sentence, that it's now their turn to kind of communicate back to you. And that's how conversations work. So it's really good practice too. So I would practice some of that too. And if you come into the library, you don't really know where to start with that, it does take practice. So you don't need to worry if you feel like you're doing it wrong. You're fine, you're okay. But you can always ask a librarian and we'd be happy to help you. And of course, reading, so important, especially because it helps build that bond with your child. But we covered most of that in the slide before. So then is writing. So reading and writing often go very much hand in hand together. As you read to your little one, they will begin to realize that the letters that they're seeing on the page are kind of like collected into these little clusters, and they're going to learn that those are words. And the first thing they learn to write will be their name. And most of the time you might see them writing their name and like it does not even look legible at all. It doesn't even look readable. It might be in like weird scribbles. It might be in shapes. Like, do not be alarmed. That is totally normal. So they usually start with shapes and these scribbles, and then they begin to come a little bit more recognizable as words. Let's see. And then once they're able to kind of recognize those clusters in their books, once they start to realize that they can put letters together to form different words, then you're going to start seeing full sentences or simple ones like I like snow or I don't like snow. So you'll kind of start seeing a little bit of a progression after you see them writing their name. And the last thing I wanted to talk about too is playing. So with the books I chose for story time, I usually try to have some kind of like play or interactive element to it. Like hand movements, maybe like stomping, body movements. Playing is super important because it allows your little one to think creatively and also use their imagination quite a bit. It can help with building narrative skills, thinking about the story in like a first, then last order. And it can also help with comprehension. So even if you do like play acting at home, like if you have like a play kitchen and, you know, he's the chef, that's a really great form of play, but if you wanted to tie play in with some kind of book that you're reading, I'll be going over a couple of those today, but there are a lot of books that are super interactive that kind of encourage that play. Okay, so a couple things right off the bat I wanted to start with before we get into any of the books are things that I want you to consider as the parent. So sometimes I've talked to a couple parents that come in here and say, like, my child is only on level 1, you know, Sally is on level 2, what's going wrong? What am I doing wrong? And the first most basic thing, do not compare your reading progress, your child's reading progress to someone else's. Everyone learns differently, everyone reads differently, everyone matures differently. So saying that your child is behind is not helpful for you, and it's not helpful for your child. Though what I would say is if you are truly, truly concerned, I would talk to your educator, if you have one. I would talk to your pediatrician, and I would even maybe talk to a librarian and just say, you know, how can I challenge my child in a good way? But really try not to stress about it, because I think your little one can also kind of pick up on that pressure and feel like they're not doing enough. So make sure that you are just keeping it positive. As long as they're reading, it is okay. And that kind of brings me to challenging your child. This kind of fine balance that you kind of play as the parent. So of course you want to challenge your child and have them read at their level, but then also kind of push the boundaries and see where they can go. But you need to be careful. If you push too much, they're going to put up this whole wall around reading and just not want to read. So really kind of gauge where they're at. And just kind of like still really, I know I keep harping on it, but like really keep it positive. You really want to keep them excited to read and positive. Which then leads to your child's interest. So if you read a book together and you find that he is super interested in like iguanas or sloths or something totally random in that book, run with it, totally run with it. So we'll say, okay, let's make a list of the topics that you're interested in, and let's go to the library and let's go find some books on iguanas or on sloths or whatever, and kind of roll with it. We see that a lot, especially with toddlers, when they start to show their interest in like cars and trucks and princesses and all of these random things, and they just kind of pick tons of books on sloths or whatever. So I would say it starts as early as toddler, right around there. If you run with their interests, you're more likely to keep them excited about what they're reading. And another thing, of course, like with excitement, you need to be excited too. I know sometimes that's super hard. If you work, you know, all day, you come home, you make dinner, you're tired, but it's really important to kind of show that you're excited about reading these books too. They pick up off of that energy and that excitement, and it makes them want to read too. And the last thing I wanted to talk about, I know Amy 100% agrees with me on this one. I know graphic novels, it's like a huge topic right now in the library field. A lot of parents are saying that graphic novels are not good, it's not real reading, but I know it may seem like they're different, but they actually are fantastic for reading. And in first and second grade, there's not a whole lot of graphic novels that you can read. There are definitely some. There's some in the reader section, and there's some in our graphic novel section too, but this is mainly a note for, you know, thinking ahead when your child is a little bit older. But I have one with me right now. This one is super popular. It's the Amulet series. It's definitely for older children, but it still kind of illustrates the point. So there are the speech bubbles here. And in the speech bubbles, there's so many great examples of vocabulary here. I'm seeing the word certain. I'm seeing location, guide. So these are words that maybe they might not have known ahead of time and that they just learned through a graphic novel. Another great thing too is that sometimes the illustrations, like here, there are absolutely no words on this page at all. And you might think, well, then what is there to read? There's so much to read here, actually. You're picking up on the characters' feelings. You're picking up on the details that might be here. Your child might be inferencing and trying to decide what's going on next. They could be putting themselves in the character's shoes. There are so many wonderful things about graphic novels. I could honestly spend the whole day talking about the graphic novels. They're wonderful. So thinking ahead, don't ever discourage your little ones from graphic novels unless it's like something you're worried about age appropriateness or something like that. And if that's the case, definitely talk to a librarian, but they're great. And that kind of goes with wordless books too. If you wanted to practice, let's see, like the picture walk I talked about earlier, my safe bet is to start with wordless books. They're perfect because you can foster inferencing, foreshadowing. You could talk about characters and their feelings, building empathy. You can do so many things with a wordless book. So if you open a book and see that there's no words, do not feel kind of discouraged from it. Actually, I would highly recommend working with that. So let's go ahead and get started with specific age level recommendations. The first kind of like segment is birth to about 8 months. So according to the American Optometric Association, babies are not born with automatic clear 20/20 vision. In fact, they have a hard time seeing just period. As you can see in this picture, it kind of depicts the eye progression based off age. They can kind of see blurry black and white targets, but not quite. So sticking with black and white high contrast books is probably best. They're definitely not going to pick up color. And not only that, but babies can only really see about, I would say about 8 to 10 inches in front of their face. So I'm not saying put the book directly like right here. Definitely don't do that. But do keep it closer to their face than you would normally do. Like, let's see. And then the other thing I would say too, this is such a short time frame that I wouldn't necessarily go out and buy tons of black and white books. They're going to grow out of this like this. So, I mean, if you want to, totally do that. But we do have a lot at the library that you can borrow. They look a lot like this, where there might not be any words at all, and it'll just be like these black and white images. If you're kind of like reading it to your baby, you can just kind of talk about what each thing is called. You can talk about what's going on. You can count things, like totally get creative with it. But again, don't feel like you need to go out and buy 30 black and white books because they're going to grow out of it so quickly. And then let's see, another thing too is high contrast. So I really like the black and white ones, but I also just really like Jane Foster. All of her books are fantastic. They're great. So there's some kind of colored background with really high contrast color, really like not a whole lot of detail, like there's not a lot going on in the background. It's just a plain colored background. I would say that by the time your little one is about 8 months, you can kind of see in this picture here how the color for their eyesight is starting to grow just a little bit more. I would say that would be a really fantastic time to kind of start introducing those books. So 4 to 8 months or so, I would definitely pick out some Jane Foster books. And the last thing I wanted to talk about too is by about 5-ish months or so, they should be able to start reacting to moving targets. So that means if you're doing like hand movements like we do with our welcome song, and we go like this, and it, you know, the itsy bitsy spider, we go like this. When they're newborn, they're not going to pick that up. I'm not saying like don't rhyme to your newborn, totally the opposite. But what I'm saying is that they're not going to be able to see the hand movements that you're doing until about 5-ish months. They should be able to start focusing too. So if you kind of go in front of them, they'll be able to like know that this is your face right here, and they should be able to start focusing in on this face, which means they could start focusing in on the book too. one thing that we do in story time to kind of help their eye progression and their movement is bubbles. So I would practice that at home too. Just have a little bit of bubbles, do a little bit of bubbles every single day, and it really helps them strengthen their eye muscles so that they can move them back and forth. All right. So next, we're going to talk about 8 months to about 2 years. Also, I know I should have mentioned this at the beginning, but if you have any questions too about anything that I'm talking about, feel free to use that chat section, and Amy, Ray can keep track of the questions that you have. And I think we should probably have some time to do some at the end too. So if you wanted other suggestions for books or something, just let me know. All right, so by about 8 months, babies should have definitely better vision, like what we saw in that picture before, though of course it will continue to develop until they reach the age of about 2, when it should be like good to go. Their depth perception also by the age of 2 should be completely developed, and they can recognize familiar faces and objects. So that's why using books with real pictures can be super helpful. The ones that I know from a lot of my patrons in Storytime that are super popular are ones with real pictures, especially ones that have baby faces in them. So they love to see smiling babies. It makes them laugh, it makes them giggle. It's actually really, really funny. It's one of my favorite things to bring out during story time. So anything by Margaret Miller here would be a really great option for real pictures. I also have that DK, My First Farm book up. And that's also really fantastic because the whole DK series uses real pictures or like real objects to kind of illustrate their vocabulary. So I would highly recommend those too. And we have tons of those at the library too. Another thing I would recommend, basically every single one of these books, except for the DK pop-up books, are board books. So I don't know if you can see from here, but the pages are super, super thick. They're made of this cardboard. I'm trying to bend it right now, and I can't really, and that's because they're designed specifically for babies. Babies, they tend to like want to learn through feeling, through putting things in their mouth. Honestly, they learn a lot about the world by putting things in their mouth. And with these board books, they're durable enough that they can kind of play with them, throw them, try and rip them, put them in their mouth. They can literally do tons of things with these board books. And they're basically almost indestructible. I'm not going to say that they are. I mend them, and I know that they're destructible, but they're at least a little bit more baby-proof than some of our easy fiction picture books. So I would pick anything that's like pretty thick. They're pretty easy to find. They're at bookstores and also here at the library. Another thing too is that they also like pop-ups. So I have the pop-up there, the DK. This is another one, pop-up peekaboo. And basically like playing like hide and seek with the images, especially with these little pop-ups. Now I will warn you, they're going to be really handsy and really grabby at this stage. So they will try and grab the pop-up. They will try and grab the lift the flap. So these are not going to last very long, but they are super great for little ones. Another thing too is wordless or at least less wordy books. I have an example down there, of course, with the little baby and the word yummy. So notice how it's only just, it's one word. So you don't really want anything with like a long plot line or anything like that. You just want to keep it real simple. I also have a picture book here. It's called Baby Belly, and completely wordless. The whole thing is wordless. And here, all you really do is just narrate what's going on. You don't need to do anything super crazy with these wordless books, but they are really great for baby. Another thing you'll want to do too is find these books that have words from everyday life. So say that you find a book, like maybe this farm one, and it says like cow, you know, and it has a picture of a cow. Or if you find another one where it's like mommy and a picture of your mommy, or a picture of daddy and a, you know, the word daddy, you want to try and reinforce those same words that you want them to use and start to recognize very, very quickly. So I would try and find books that kind of have that a little bit. And of course, I talked a little bit about the interactive elements of like a pop-up. There's also really unique ones too. Like this one here is called Go Vote Baby. And you can actually slide it back and forth like this. Now, granted, I would probably use this right around like a year and a half or so once they start to kind of understand exactly what it means that they're doing. But anything that kind of has a sliding component, anything that might have a tab to it that you can pull is fantastic. And there are certain books too that, like on the sides here, they might have these little tiny, these tabs almost, and it's perfect because you want to try and encourage them to flip their own page themselves. And that kind of shape of the book really helps them do that. All right, so by 2 to 3 years old, they, of course, you know, like with toddlers, they are very hard to keep sitting in one spot. So you're going to want to make sure that the books that you do choose are engaging, that they're silly. But one thing I really want to say is that if you notice that your child is just not having it, they don't want to sit, do not sit and force them to do that. It's just going to create this kind of negative experience around reading. So you really want to keep it positive. If they're truly not listening, what I would do is maybe go for a walk really quick, or maybe say, let's take a break from this and let's do it a little bit later today. But the easiest thing is just by picking engaging books. I actually had one child who was in my baby and toddler story times who just would not pay attention, never paid attention at all. But right now he's in about 2nd or 3rd grade and he's in advanced reading levels. And I think the reason being is because even if you think that your little one is not listening or that they're kind of playing with their toys while they're listening to you, that they're not comprehending what's happening, they totally are. They're picking it up. So don't worry at all. So toddlers really love a rhyming text. So brown bear, what do you see? It has this kind of rhythm to it that you can kind of play with. So basically anything by Bill Martin Jr., Eric Carle, they're great. Jane Cabrera also has a really great collection of books based on like famous nursery rhymes and just songs. So Wheels on the Bus, If You're Happy and You Know It, I'm a Little Teapot, like all of those kind of, you know, foundational songs that we use in story time. They also really love like an interactive text. So I really like Dear Zoo for this. And the reason I like it is because here they wrote to the zoo to send them a pet, and they sent them an elephant. We all know that's not a very good pet. So he was too big, so I sent him back. So I actually have the little ones do that with me. They take their thumb and they go like this and they say, I sent him back. So anything that kind of like asks for them to kind of be engaged or kind of to talk back to the book is perfect. All right, let's see. And also anything with a pretty predictive text, they like those as well. So kind of knowing what's going to happen or if it kind of follows the kind of same scheme. So like with Llama Llama Red Pajama, everything kind of rhymes and follows this flow. Same with Brown Bear, what do you see? We know that there's going to be some kind of animal at the end of it. And so they really like to know that like what's coming. Let's see. All right, again, also with 2 to 3 years old, we're thinking about too, keeping it simple with their vocab. And these are basically called like concept books. So we're talking ABCs, shapes, colors, animals. So it's basically one book that's devoted to that one topic. So here you see Good Night, construction site, dump trucks, colors. The entire book is devoted to colors. This is great for building vocabulary. And they're super simple too. We have so many different renditions and different like characters kind of talking about these concepts, so you can still make it fun and kind of build these concepts around their interests. It's also important to keep a shorter book or something less wordy. I would say one of my favorites for this, again, Eric Carle, is this book down at the bottom that with the gorilla. It says, "I am a gorilla and I thump my chest. Can you do it?" And then the little boy says, "I can do it." That's it. That's all that's on the page. There's no like creative plot line. It's not like deep character changes or emotions or any, it's just simple. So that's what I would do. It also again has that interactive element that I talked about a little bit ago, where you're kind of encouraging them to do some kind of movement, which goes along with our playing that we were talking about a little bit ago. Same with, is everyone ready for some fun? I have a copy of it right here. You can see that's pretty much it that's on the page. And it's just basically telling them to jump up and down. So it's interactive again, barely any words. I would say anything Dan Thomas is fantastic for 2 to 3 years old. And even all the way up to preschool, kindergarten. I mean, I use them for almost every story time that I can get my hands on because they're fun and they're great. And then when you start to introduce picture books to them, I would say now would be a good time to do it. But make sure that your little one knows how to turn a page by themselves. Make sure that they don't throw the book anymore. So when you start to see signs that they can respect a book and know how a book functions, that would be the time to start introducing the picture books to them. Let's see. And then the other thing I've just been obsessed with lately have been the trace and learn books. So if you wanted to start introducing letter formation, number formation to them, these kind of books are wonderful. So it actually gives you arrows to where you can start forming the letters with their fingers. And these are great. I mean, this one is an Easter one. It's the closest one I could find. But they're wonderful for starting the writing process for your 2 or 3-year-old. And certainly by this time, you're bringing the ABCs into it. And this would be a really great way to kind of show them that there's a physical component to the ABC song. And then, of course, I talked a little bit, of course, about that books that encourage movement. So anything that gets them moving would be perfect. All right. So by the time your little one hits 4 to 5 years old, they should be able to sit for longer periods of time. It shouldn't be a tantrum sometimes. I mean, sometimes I can't make any promises, but it should be a little bit better sitting down with them for longer books. What I would still do though, in order to keep their attention, is to keep books with varying lengths. So don't just pick tons of books with lots of plot and lots of story. Maybe pick one that's a little bit shorter. Maybe pick one that's super long with a big plot. Maybe one silly one that barely has any words. That way you're mixing it up and you're keeping them engaged. Let's see. And sometimes with these longer books, new vocabulary will be introduced. And this is perfect. These are words just beyond like car, cow, mommy, those kinds of things. And the one book that I really like that kind of does that is Can Somebody Please Scratch My Back? Now, the reason being is because this little elephant, this poor guy, his back is just killing him. It is so scratchy and he can't itch it. So all these animals kind of come in and ask to help. Now, one of them, like it's just beyond like a cow, it's beyond a pig, it's beyond these basic animals that your little one probably already knows by heart. And we talk about like a sloth or prairie dogs. These are animals that are not necessarily in your animal books. So it's building new vocabulary, and you can talk a little bit more about sloths and what do we know about them? We know that they're slow. So they can learn new things just from the vocab in the books. And then also if they seem really interested in the prairie dogs, this would be the perfect opportunity to bring out your little list that I talked about earlier and write prairie dogs at the top. And the next time you guys come in, get books on prairie dogs. You'll also want to grab books with different styles of font and also sizing of the font to get them used to print awareness, which is basically the knowledge of print on the page. That each letter, symbol, number, etc., it means something, and clustered together, it means a word, and even in the bigger picture, it means a sentence. So you can talk about how the title is always big on the page. That's a great way to start. You can talk about how sometimes in books, when the characters are whispering, the font is just a little bit smaller, and that's how you know that they're whispering. So a really good way to remember that too is with the book Be Quiet. Here, he is yelling, "Be quiet!" But then these little guys down here have regular font or smaller font. So you can kind of assume he's like, do you think he's talking to us? So it's kind of like a lower register, not as loud as being yelled at. Plus, you can talk a little bit more about the spine, what's on the spine. You can talk about, let's see, the inside pages. You can talk about the cover, the back cover, the front cover. I know your teacher would be super impressed if you came in and they already knew the components of a book, and that's part of print awareness. And then, of course, again, silly books. I mean, I could harp on this part all day. Silly books are just, they're fun, and they keep little ones engaged. My favorite one to do, personally, I know Amy might have a different one, Miss Becky might have a different one, but my favorite is the book with no pictures. So I always ask before doing this one, like, gosh, this seems so boring. Do you guys actually want to read a book that has no pictures? And they're all like, I don't want to. But then by the time I say boo-boo butt, which is some of the words here in this book, I mean, it sends them to a different level. It just, the fact that a grown-up is saying these silly words, making these silly noises, it just sets them over the edge. I don't know what it is, but I mean, it's hilarious. BJ Novak here has some really fantastic books that are silly and super engaging for little ones. So I highly, highly recommend. And then again, too, for 4 or 5 years old, dialogic reading. So basically talking to your little one about what's going on in the text. You can also ask them about how they feel. Like, how would you feel if you were this character? What's going on? What do you think is going to go on? How do you think this is going to end? So these kind of open-ended questions that I talked about a little bit ago. And a really good one to do that with is "that is not a good idea." So this goose is invited over for dinner by a fox. And every page it's like, do you think that's a good idea? Do you think that's a good idea? And the ending is a complete twist from what they think. So this is a really good one to practice that with. And of course, the importance of rhyming books just does not cease. It is always important, especially around this age. Of course, Dr. Seuss is top-notch when it comes to rhyming. So I would bring out some Dr. Seuss here. Some of his books are really, really long. So I wouldn't necessarily bring all of them over to a toddler, but I think by 4 to 5, they should be okay. And one thing too about rhyming is when you see the "I am Sam I am," you can play a rhyming game afterwards where you say the word Matt. What rhymes with Matt? And then they say bat, sat, and you can go back and forth and play this rhyming game. And it is totally okay if they make up words that aren't even words that rhyme. And it's at least going to show you that they understand what rhyming means, that they can pick up the sounds in the words. And Dr. Seuss makes up words. I'm sure it's okay too. If your little one makes up words too, it's perfectly okay. And of course, we talked a little bit about concept books earlier, but I would say these are wonderful educational tools designed to inform, but in a really creative and fun way. And I would say Mo Willems' "A Busy Creature's Day Eating" would be a good one for 4 to 5, because of course it's going through what he eats in a day and the alphabet, but then it starts to get really silly, and kids really seem to like it a lot. And of course, Opposites would be a good one as well. It's kind of hard sometimes to find good opposite books, but I would say right around this time too, that would be a good time to introduce that. Okay, and this slide in particular, I want to harp on it. Do not compare your little one's reading progress to anyone else's. This is really when it's going to come to play because your little one is starting to enter school and their friend might be coming home with a level 3, but they're only at a level 1. Totally okay. Don't worry. Talk to your educator though, if you really are concerned. Another thing too is they should be able to sit definitely now longer with more plot in the book, a more complex storyline. And they should be able to maybe sit by themselves and look through the book, even if they're not necessarily reading the book. Sometimes if they just sit off to themselves and look at the pictures, that's okay. I would say some good, longer picture books. Dragons Love Tacos, awesome. I also really like Beagle here, one of my all-time favorites. The pictures are gorgeous. The writing is so wonderful. Highly recommend this one. And of course, Where the Wild Things Are. By this time too, they should also be getting into readers. So these are specifically designed to help them learn to read. The one warning that I do want to give you though, is that each publisher has a different idea of what they think level 1 or what level 2 means. So if you take home an I Can Read, it might look way more hard than Ready to Read, or it might look way easier than Step into Reading. So all of these publishers, I wish it was more consistent across the board, but it's not. So it just means that you as the parent, before you take home the book, just come through it, just see like what the level looks like. And even if you challenge them a little bit, it just looks a tad bit harder than what you would normally take home, that's okay. I would still do it. And sometimes these readers, like this one here, they're devoted to popular TV characters or movie characters. And so I would say you can kind of mix these kind of fun, engaging readers with the sunshine readers. So I have the picture there of the ones, it's like that giant stack, Quiet in the Library, the humongous cat teeth. I'm going to be honest with you. They're not the most engaging. They're not that fun. The illustrations are pretty outdated, but it's one of the best that we have. It's one of the best systems that are out there. I've been doing a lot of research to try to find others, and there's just not. So what I would recommend, if you are starting to learn to read, or if your teacher comes to you and says, you know, he is on a level C, I would grab some Bs. That way you're helping to build the confidence because it's just a tad easier than where he's at. C is right on level, cool. But I would also pick some Ds to kind of slowly challenge your little one into reading. And this is the same kind of concept that they use at Centerville City Schools. Emily Faust, the early literacy specialist there, that's what she encourages her teachers to tell parents as well. So make sure you grab a variety in the range, not just the letter that they're assigned. Another thing too, we have these Bella and Rosies. The one thing with these two, they're so cute and they're so fun, and they're a really great alternative to those early sunshine readers. But even though they're color coordinated, does not mean that it's a level. So here's this one here, but then I might pick up another one that's the same color and it might be way harder. So again, you just kind of have to comb through the book before you take it home. But again, really make sure that you take home a variety of reading levels, not just the level they're assigned. And this would be an awesome, awesome time to start introducing your little one to chapter books if you haven't already. Rather than just handing them a chapter book and say, like, have at it, have fun, unless you're comfortable with that and unless they're also comfortable with that. But I would first start reading a chapter book to them, maybe at night. If you wanted to just do a chapter a night, that would be a good way to start. And then you could kind of like increase it to do, maybe they read a paragraph, you read a paragraph. You could increase it to you read one whole page, I'll read the next. But either way, you're going to want to make sure if it's a chapter book that it's entertaining, that it's highly action-packed. that there's a lot going on, or that there's a really like interesting mystery that's going on that they need to solve. Some good ones that my go-tos usually are the Magic Tree House series. Not only is it super fantastical, but there's a brother-sister duo. It's a lot of fun. It has pictures in some of them. So I would highly recommend going to Magic Tree House. The one thing I would say with them too, I would say with most of these books actually, I would maybe read the first one first, just so you kind of get an idea of what's going on, like what's going to be carried on into the rest of the series. But really, you could read 1 and then number 20 and then 5 and then 14 and it not make a difference because they don't go in any kind of like sequential order. But I would definitely do like a Magic Tree House. I also have here Geronimo Stilton. These are good too because in some of the books, it will highlight the words. I don't know if you can see some different colored words. Some of the font looks different. And the word shivering, for instance, is written in like these squiggly lines and it's blue. So even if they don't know that word, they can kind of learn about it by the font. So the shivering, we know you go like this when you're cold. Well, that's what the word is doing. So you can kind of learn a little bit more about vocabulary in books like this. Another series I really like too, Puppy Place. That's another good starter chapter book. Same with Junie B. Jones. But basically any kind of like early chapter book is fantastic. We have so many different options that are both in the reader section and the juvenile fiction area. So just kind of be conscious of that too. And then the last thing I want to talk about too is text and audio options. Now there's really no age for this one really. But for 5 to 7 year olds, and even I would maybe say for some of the earlier ones too, where they're starting to learn to read, it is just beyond helpful for them to read a book and physically see what's going on in the page, but then also hearing it out loud at the same exact time. It's basically helping them pick up the sounds and words. It's helping them pick up the syllables. It's helping them realize that everything that they're hearing is already written down on that page. It's just extremely, extremely beneficial. We have so many different options for this at the library. The first, I have a playaway here. This one here is called Ghost Night. When you open it up, you're going to get this little thing that looks like this. And basically what happens is you put in a little battery here, you put in some headphones, and you can listen to the book out loud. And actually the patron I talked to, I mentioned at the very beginning of this presentation, she took home the book, the physical copy of the book, and the playaway at the same time so that her little one could listen to it and kind of give herself a little bit of a break and also read it at the same time. So I would highly recommend these playaways. They're really fun. And honestly, I've also noticed too, Amy can probably say the same, they're really great for independence. You can kind of let them off by themselves, put in their headphones and do their chores while they listen to this book, or they can sit off to themselves and read their book by themselves. It's really, really wonderful. Another thing too, this here is called a Vox book. We also have Wonder books, but that are essentially the same thing. Down here, it's going to have an audio panel, so you can play the book out loud, and it'll make some kind of noise to have you flip the page. It'll make a noise, and you just kind of go to the next page, and it'll read everything out loud. This is also fantastic too if you think about. There are so many words on the page. Sometimes your little one, they don't know. They won't know. They won't know how to say it. But by hearing it out loud, that's like one step closer to understanding what's going on in the book. And the last thing I wanted to talk about too, it's not necessarily a text and audio option, but it's a different way to kind of incorporate early literacy into their play or into their everyday. And this is a launch pad. This one here specifically teaches them how to read. And the reason I like this, and my last kind of big recommendation, is just making sure that the books that you're bringing home, especially for 5 to 7 year olds, are a complete variety. So don't just bring home tons of chapter books. Maybe bring home still some picture books that are a little easier. Maybe still bring home your chapter books, your readers, these kind of books that read out loud to you. Make it a variety. That way you're keeping them entertained. The last thing I want to talk about too, really quickly, is these are some resources that you can kind of go to for more information. The Children's Book Council has a wonderful website with book lists specific to each age. The Children's Trust, it's a specific article just on choosing books for your child. And it has different age levels too, that you can kind of get more information about how to choose the right book. The other thing too is Tumble Book Library. It's on the kids webpage, on our library webpage. And I love it because, like I mentioned before, hearing and also seeing on the page, super important. And it highlights the word as it says it out loud. And feel free to ask us for more information if you need it. And of course, the Every Child Ready to Read initiative. This is a nationwide campaign. Our library here is a part of it. We are going to be bringing back the Every Child Ready to Read workshop in September. So keep your eyes peeled for that. It'll give you some ideas about how to incorporate the 5 early literacy skills into your daily life at home. And that is it. Any questions? I have my contact information there. I'm going to be out on maternity in about 4 weeks. So I might not be able to get back to you right away, but I know any children's librarian will be happy to help.
Yeah, you can unmute yourself if you do have a question, or you can use the chat.